Chapter 21. I felt my entire body tremble as I watched the coven of vampires move forward. The Winston coven had waged war on the werewolves during the ancient times. Now that they knew I was alive, they wanted me. As the firstborn biological werewolf, they felt I was capable of many evils, and believed I was better off dead. They wanted to kill me, but not until after they had access to my blood. They had offered my pack $3 million in exchange for me, but they made it clear that they would stop at nothing until I was dead. So, it was no surprise that I was completely overwhelmed now that they were here, just hundreds of feet away from me. Reese pulled me into a protective embrace. I felt safe with him. I felt even safer when Colton came to stand at my side. "Darkin, may we have a word with you?" One of the guys, a tall, lanky guy with bleach blonde hair, called out. Theo was the first to approach them. The rest of us followed after him. We stood close enough to listen in on what he was about to say while also maintaining a safe distance. "Gentlemen, what can we do for you?" Theo asked. "Cut the shit. You know exactly what we want. We're willing to offer you the $3 million right here, in cash." "We're not interested in your money," Aidan informed them. "That's a shame. We were willing to cooperate with you in exchange for Princess Fallon. But it seems that you are choosing not to cooperate, so it looks like we're going to have to take matters into our own hands. If you want to get to Fallon, that means you're going to have to get through us first," Theo threatened. The blonde guy turned to the guy to his left. "Does he scare you, James?" "Not in the least. Why don't we flip a coin? If it's heads, you get to keep Fallon. If it's tails, then she's ours." As he spoke the words, James's eyes lingered on me. I could feel him sizing my body up and down. I glared at him. "How about we don't?" Theo asked. "In fact, how about the four of you get the hell out of here?" "Don't you know who we are?" the blonde guy asked. "Don't you know who we are?" Aidan asked. He glanced from Theo to Colton and Reese. They must have somehow spoken with their eyes, because all four of them shifted into their wolf forms, leaving me as the alone Darkin still standing. All four of them, with their dark fur, stood there, growling at the Winston coven. I thought it would have been enough to intimidate them, but to my surprise, James let out a laugh. "If you think we're afraid of a bunch of growling wolves, you have another thing coming to you. You all look so pathetic now. I could just snap your furry little necks, take Fallon with us, and call it a day." "I wouldn't go snapping any necks if you know what's best for you," a voice said from behind me. I whirled around to find Kane standing there. "I thought you were going home." "Yeah, well, fortunately I didn't." His green eyes held mine for a moment, before he turned to the Winston coven. "You will walk away from Princess Fallon right now. In fact, you will forget that she even exists. In your memories, she will still be dead, and you will have no reason to want her or her blood. You will leave this property right now." At first, I didn't think that Kane's compulsion was going to work. But then, slowly, the Winston coven backed away from us and then left the yard. Relief passed through me as my mates all shifted back into their human forms. The other wolves at the wedding all began to resume what they were doing before the Winston coven had decided to randomly crash it. "You guys really thought growling at the Winston coven was enough to scare them away?" Kane asked, looking around at my mates. "You know vampires don't scare off easily, and the Winston coven are some of the deadliest vampires out there." "I guess I wasn't thinking straight. I was just so worried about Raven," Theo replied quietly. "Going forward, I can't have my pack making dumb mistakes like that. You know, one fuck up like that could have cost all of you your lives. Raven could have been taken from us." "I'm sorry," Theo apologized, which surprised me. He wasn't the type to apologize. Usually he just went off on his own to sulk somewhere when he made mistakes. I was pretty sure that there must have been something about the dynamic between him and Kane that had him apologizing. For some reason he was willing to say he was sorry just to appease Kane. It was the strangest thing I had ever witnessed, but I suppose that I shouldn't have been surprised. I had known all along that Theo and Kane's relationship was complicated, at best. Thankfully for all of you, I just happened to be in the vicinity. Can you imagine what might have happened if I didn't compel them? "I'm sort of confused by that," Aidan said. "Yeah, me too. I didn't think vampires were able to be compelled," Colton said. "That's true when it comes to normal werewolves," Kane agreed with a nod. "But due to what I am, my abilities are stronger than everyone else's." He didn't need to say what he was for us to all understand. He was 1/3 of the triangle, meaning he was stronger than all of us. And them. If it weren't for him, my mates probably would have been chopped liver. And that wasn't even to mention me. So once again Kane had saved my life. Chapter 22. Kane stayed with us until we returned to the human world after winter break. Was relieved by the fact that he was always there. Even though all of my mates made me feel safe, I knew there was a level of protection he had to offer that the other Darkin just didn't have. It wasn't just protection. It was power. It didn't make me feel more strongly about him, but it certainly didn't hurt. Knowing that he was able to protect me in ways that the others couldn't. I was probably sure that Theo realized that. And hated it. When we went back home, there was another hurdle that we had to overcome, too. The 5 of us had gotten so used to our living arrangements. But now there were 6. I could tell that Colton and Reese were most excited about the fact that Kane was back in their lives. Aidan seemed cautious. I knew he wasn't exactly thrilled about Kane's return, but he wasn't about to protest it either. Especially when Kane was one of the 3 most powerful alphas in the world. Theo, on the other hand, spent the majority of his time sulking. He barely even came out of his room, and he definitely didn't talk to me. I knew he was mad about the kiss he had witnessed, but it wasn't my fault that fate had decided to throw yet another mate my way. It was all so complicated. Then again, I was starting to get used to that. Wasn't sure if I would ever be able to resume a normal life again. I wasn't sure if I even would have wanted to. Things had been complicated from the very beginning, since long before I had even set foot on the Werewolf Academy campus. Complicated was my new normal, and I wasn't sure if I would have wanted it any other way. What are you even going to do here all day when we're off at Werewolf Academy? Theo asked Kane the night before it was time for us all to return to Werewolf Academy. Well, I thought I might take up knitting, Kane replied with a shrug. I just stared at him, unsure if he was being serious. Of course I'm not being serious. He shook his head. Eventually you'll catch on to my sarcasm. He paused. The real answer is that I am going to be plotting. Plotting what? Reese asked. A novel. I'm writing a novel, Kane replied. He rolled his eyes. Our next moves as a pack. Where we'll be in a year from now or 5 years from now. We're going to be at war, I murmured quietly. Yeah, I know. Since we formed the triangle, it means a war is coming. He didn't look entirely convinced. Yes, that's how it's supposed to work. Haven't you heard about the prophecy? Of course I've heard about it just from listening in on your thoughts, Kane replied. Is there ever a moment that you're not thinking about the prophecy? Or the fires or war that the triangle is going to ignite? I rolled my eyes. At least some of us are taking it seriously. I'm not really sure why you're not. Do you see me starting a war? Kane asked. No. How is this war going to start? You can't tell me it's going to begin just because the triangle was formed. Wars don't just happen on all their own. Something has to trigger it all. Even though he had a point, one that I had given a lot of consideration to. Myself, I wasn't so willing to believe that a war wouldn't happen either. I don't know what's going to cause it. The only thing I do know is that there's a very good chance it could happen, and we need to be ready. It's not my fault he kissed me and became the 3rd part of the triangle, I thought to myself. Of course, Kane had overheard my thought. So let me guess. You regret kissing me now. I never said that, I replied quietly. Kane didn't look even the slightest bit convinced by my words. I thought about it for a moment. Kissing Kane had been one of the best experiences of my life. But would I have done it even if I had known then that it would cause the triangle to form? Yes, I would have. When it came down to it, I would have much rather have died than not known what it would be like to kiss Kane. I watched as a smile tugged at his lips. He liked that thought clearly. Raven, did you remember to put your blood out for Javier? Reese asked me. Oh shit, I completely forgot. Would you mind drawing it for me? I asked. Who the hell is Javier? Kane asked, his green eyes meeting mine from across the kitchen island. Javier is my bloodmate, I replied. Wait, what? You actually kissed a vampire? Kane wrinkled his nose. Well, yes. You've got to be kidding me. I've waited hundreds of years for our mate bond to actually take effect, and now I learned that you kissed a vampire. He looked and sounded completely disgusted. It honestly left me feeling a little offended. First of all, he's only half vampire, I informed him. He's also half werewolf. I didn't even know that until after I kissed him. but second of all, I didn't actually choose to kiss him. He compelled me, so now I leave my blood out on the stoop for him every month. I watched as Reese fumbled with the vials and the syringe to draw my blood. Is he affiliated with the Winston Coven? Kane asked. Not to my knowledge. I paused. We still aren't entirely sure who tipped off. The Winston Coven. Could have been Javier, but it might have been Sarah, who was my lady's maid back when I was Princess Fallon. She goes by the name Lydia now. You seem to have a lot of drama, and a lot of enemies in high places, Kane. Pieced together. That's one way to put it. What can I say? I am Princess Fallon after all. Okay, first order of business. We need to get rid of this Javier. Kane sighed. So while you guys all go to school, I guess I have to figure out how to do this. You're going to just kill Javier? I asked with raised eyebrows. You sound disappointed by that. He studied my face. I shrugged. To be honest, I wasn't really sure how I felt about the idea of killing Javier. Even though Aidan had wanted us to get rid of him ever since I became his bloodmate, I actually didn't think our situation was that bad. No, Javier wasn't my favorite werewolf/vampire hybrid in the world, but I wasn't sure if I really thought he deserved to die either. As long as Javier gets to drink my blood at least once a month, every month, it doesn't seem like this whole bloodmate thing has actually hurt anyone. You are joking, right? Kane asked. Why would I joke about that? I asked. Are you really so foolish as to believe that this arrangement is hurting no one? He studied my face for a long moment before sighing. You are that foolish. This arrangement is hurting me. I'm your mate and I don't like it. I'm going to get rid of him. He watched as Reese drew my blood from my arm. I don't like that he's put you through this. Look at what you have to do every month just so he can survive, so you can both survive. He pointed his chin at my arm. I also don't like the idea of you having a connection to anyone but me, so I need to get rid of him. She has a connection to every single werewolf in this room, Theo said, glaring at Kane. Are you going to do something to hurt us? Is that a challenge? Kane's eyes locked on Theo's. No, it's not a challenge, I told him. And if you hurt anyone in this room, I will never speak to you again. No one here in this room asked to be my mate. Fate chose that for all of us. You need to just deal with it. Kane's eyes moved around the room, staring at each of the guys. I would never hurt any of them. They're all fair game. You can't honestly be okay with the possibility that Raven might choose one of us who isn't you, Theo said. I know you, Kane, and I know how much you hate losing. You're right, brother. I don't like losing, but I also understand that this is something that all of you agreed to before I came into the picture as Raven's mate. I'm not about to be the party pooper, nor will I allow my own jealousy or beliefs on this rain on anyone's parade. So, even if she chooses one of us, you'll just let it be? Or will you try to change the outcome of her decision? Theo asked him. If she doesn't pick me, which I think we can all agree is a very big if, then I will accept her decision. I've already told Raven that her happiness is what matters most to me. That being said, I will do everything in my power to ensure the best possible outcome for myself in this race. I am not going down without a fight. So may the best man win. Kane glanced around at each of my mates before glancing over at me again. But there is something you should know, Raven. What? I asked, nervous about what he was going to say next. I am willing to be a part of this game. We're all playing where the prize is your heart. I'm actually quite intrigued by all of this. I'm sure that you will soon realize that I can be pretty competitive. He paused. But the invitation to this game only extends to everyone in this room. If you get any new mates, then I will rip their heads off. I'm not going to kiss anyone else, so I can promise you that there will be no new mates. At least I hope there wouldn't be. 5 mates were more than enough. But I also knew that my desire to kiss Kane hadn't been in my control. If another mate happened to be out there, I couldn't guarantee that I wouldn't kiss him. Chapter 23. The weeks passed by slowly as we all adapted to this new life. Kane stayed at the house every day, closing himself off in his bedroom while the rest of us went to school. One day in mid-April, I got home from school and found that Kane was loading his BMW up with bags. Where are you going? I asked him as he piled his shit into the trunk. His green eyes locked on mine. I'll be back soon. No. Where are you going? I repeated. You seem a little disappointed that I'm leaving, he noted. Disappointed doesn't even explain half of what I'm feeling right now. When you told me that you'd come back soon back in July, I believed you. I trusted you. I thought you'd be back soon. But then you never came back. For months and months I waited for you to show your face and you never did. Then you finally showed up at Maddie's wedding, and you told me you were coming back to fight for me, for the chance with me. And now you're leaving again? Already. I knew that the pain was obvious in my voice. I was fighting back the tears, which I hated. So you do care about me. There was an amused look in Kane's eyes. Of course I care about you, you dumbass. The bigger question is, do you care about me? I asked. He pressed his lips against mine hard as his hands gripped the back of my neck. It was a passionate kiss, a hungry kiss. When he pulled away from me, I stared into his emerald green eyes. If you were trying to distract me so you didn't have to answer the question, it didn't work, I managed to whisper. I care more about you than you will ever know, Raven. And that's exactly why I need to leave. He slammed the trunk shut. I don't understand, I replied, shaking my head. You have to leave me again. Because you care about me? That doesn't even make sense. He pulled his sunglasses on as he climbed into his car. I have to go take care of a problem. A problem? I asked. Javier. I'll be back as soon as I've killed him. Glancing up at me, he blew me a kiss before backing the car out of the driveway. Call me crazy, but I actually think it's really freaking adorable that he went to kill Javier for you, Maddie said as we sat at our usual lunch table. Yeah, I agree. It's so manly and beastly. Vince popped a French fry into his mouth. I would love it if Julie would go kill some girl or guy who she was jealous of. This has nothing to do with jealousy, you guys, I replied with a laugh. Kane is doing this just because he's insane. He's insanely in love. And I agree with Vince. Guy is totally jealous. Maddie agreed. Everyone knows that a lot of bloodmates end up together. He's so afraid that you'll end up choosing Javier. Which is totally understandable, considering he is such a hottie, Vince added. I never wanted Javier. You really don't think he's doing this just because he's afraid that my arrangement as his bloodmate could cause me to die? I mean, that might play a teeny tiny role in all of this, Vince agreed with a nod. But I think he just knows that bloodmates are supposed to have incredibly good sex and feels insecure and threatened by that. Wow. I allowed all of this to sink in. I had really thought that Kane had felt the need to go kill Javier because he was afraid for me and concerned about my well-being. Was it possible that he really was doing all of this because he was jealous of Javier? The idea made me sort of sad, to think that he could go end his life just because he was jealous. It also made me hope that he wouldn't try to do the same to the rest of my mates. They were the bigger threat as far as I was concerned. Kane had acted like he would be okay with whatever decision I made, but what if he wasn't? What if he didn't stop killing until he had me to himself completely? Kane was gone for weeks. The worst part about it was that I didn't hear from him at all. He had his phone and he also could have tried to communicate me through Mindspeak, but he just didn't. It made me sad and it made me miss him even more. My body had gone deep into withdrawals, but I thought that maybe that was what he wanted. Maybe he knew that me not hearing from him at all would only make me want him more. It was a torture that I couldn't quite describe. I felt hopeless and moody, desperate to see him or hear from him again. Normally I spent a lot of time with my mates, but now? Well, all I did was sit in my bedroom all day studying and wondering when I would ever hear from him again. If I would ever hear from him again. I didn't like the girl who I had become. I was supposed to be stronger than this, but I felt so weak again. I wasn't supposed to need a guy, but it really felt like I needed Kane. And I hated every second. Chapter 24. In the beginning of May, I got home from school one night. The house was dark and empty. All of my mates were at student conferences which were supposed to run pretty late into the night. It was the first time 4 of my mates had left me completely alone since I'd escaped from Milos's dungeon. And it was a weird feeling. Actually, it was more than just a weird feeling. It was also sort of giving me separation anxiety. I didn't like being alone, especially in this huge house at night. I didn't worry about Iris that much these days, but I found myself worrying that she or Milos were hiding out in the house somewhere. Of course, none of that was too logical. If Milos and Iris were going to try to kidnap me again, they probably would have done it in a trickier way, the same way they'd gone about it last year. But my PTSD was real and it clearly wasn't going away anytime soon. I just hated that I was so codependent on my mates in the meantime. Kane's voice filled my mind then. Did you just get home from school? I'm in the backyard. He was home. Finally. I'll be right there. The excitement that I felt about him being home was ready to boil over. Being away from him had been so hard. It was hard to believe that there was finally an end to all of this. All I felt was relief. And did I mention excitement? As I headed out the back door, I found him sitting in a lounge chair by the pool. His emerald green eyes, which sparkled underneath the outdoor lighting, locked on mine. Hey you. Hey. I smiled when I saw him. I'm so happy you're home. Home. It's funny that you call it that, he murmured. What's so funny about that? You do live here, I reminded him. The only thing that feels even remotely like home about this place is you. The butterflies swarmed around inside my stomach. So, did you get the job done? I asked quietly, even though I didn't really want to think about it. Yeah, the problem is taken care of. His eyes didn't move away from mine as he spoke, and I got the feeling it was because he could not look at me. It was like I was a magnet for his eyes. Well, the feeling was mutual. It was as if being away from him made me see him more clearly or something. My mate was drop-dead gorgeous. His muscles looked way more pronounced underneath the dim lighting, and his facial features just looked so much more masculine. I wasn't sure what it was, but I had this uncontrollable urge to rip all his clothes off. Suddenly I was picturing him sitting there without any clothes on, and, phew, I tried to pull myself out of my own dirty thoughts. His body is over there, Kane said, pointing his chin at the grass next to the pool. Moving closer, I got my first glimpse at the body that lay lifelessly just feet away from us. I knelt down to take a good look at it, and that was when I began to feel sick to my stomach. Javier looked just like he always did, except for the fact that he was lifeless. There was a wooden stake still poking out of his heart. I swallowed hard, a lump forming in the back of my throat. It was strange to think that Javier had been alive, that my blood had been keeping him alive, and now he was gone. The professor who had once taught me, who had once compelled me to kiss him. My lips had once been on his, and now his skin was drained of all its color, and I wasn't sure how to feel about any of that. You should be thanking me, Kane said, his green eyes locking on mine again. I saved your life. By taking his? I found myself asking. Kane rose to his feet and moved closer to me. It was the best thing for everyone involved, Raven. Now you'll never have to worry about donating your blood to him again, and we'll never have to worry about you dying because he wasn't able to drink your blood. I knew that everything he was saying was true, but I still wasn't entirely convinced. Did you really do this because you were jealous? I found myself asking the question I had been wondering for months now. Is there something wrong with a mate doing whatever he has to do to keep what's his? Kane asked, that amusement swirling around inside those green eyes. Really? That's the real reason you killed him? 'Cause you thought I would choose him over you? I can't believe you would do that. Do you know the real reason I did it, Raven? Kane asked. Yes. Why did you kill him? Because I'm in love with you. You protect the one you love, your mate. Without saying another word, he brought his lips to mine. I was hesitant at first, considering there was a dead body just feet away from us. But I quickly gave into the kiss as he deepened it, and his hands fell to the back of my neck. The rain began to fall all around us as we continued to kiss out there. Could smell the scent of the rain hitting against the cement patio. Something about the moment we were in all felt so perfect, and I found myself getting completely lost in him. When we pulled away, he breathed against my mouth. His emerald green eyes stared deeply into mine. The way he stared at me. Well, we were lucky we weren't on Nocturne Island. Was pretty sure that if we were there, we would have set the night on fire. With the burning desire that lingered in the air between us. His arms fell to my waist. Running his hands underneath the hemline, he peeled the white shirt I was wearing over my head. I pulled his shirt off of him too. His eyes ran down the length of my body, and I could see the hunger in them. It matched my own craving for him. I needed to know what it would be like with him. I knew that if I didn't find out now, I could end up wondering for the rest of my life. So I didn't stop him as he pulled off my bra or my shorts. I didn't stop him as he pushed my panties to the side, or as he touched me in places that I had been dying for him to touch. I didn't stop him as his mouth explored every inch of me, making me explode against his tongue, or as he pushed himself inside of me. As I moaned and writhed underneath of him as he moved in and out of me, I didn't regret any of it. And as we both called each other's names out into the darkness of the night, our bodies perfectly in sync as we climaxed together, I knew that even if this was the only time that I ever got to experience this with Kane, it was worth every second. Chapter 25. All 5 of my mates and I ended up burying Javier's body in the dark woods around 2 a.m. that night. We were all nervous about the possibility of getting caught, even though nothing technically said that you weren't allowed to bury a dead body there. But just to avoid anyone spotting us, we had Colton and Reese stand guard at different parts of the woods. I gotta admit, I'm really glad that he's dead, Aidan said as he finished shoveling the last bit of dirt into the grave, covering Javier's body. Knowing that you could have died at any moment before of this asshole was pretty nerve-wracking. Yeah, I think we'll all be able to sleep much better from now on knowing that he's gone, Theo admitted. You're welcome. Kane's green eyes flitted over to meet mine, and I knew that he was gloating. I rolled my eyes. I still felt sort of sad about it, but I knew I needed to stop feeling that way. I needed to stop sympathizing with the villains in my life. At the end of the day, Javier never should have compelled me to be his bloodmate if he didn't want to end up dead. It was some really bad decision making on his behalf, one that had landed him buried in the dark woods. From a distance I heard the sound of something rustling in the leaves. Do you guys hear that? I whispered to my mates. If they hadn't heard it the first time, there was no mistaking the sound of footsteps which seemed to be moving swiftly in our direction. Let's go invisible. Kane's voice filled my mind, and I knew that he was communicating to all of us as a pack. I closed my eyes and whispered Invisibla, in the witch language. I watched as my arms and legs went transparent, just as all of my mates seemed to disappear into thin air themselves. We all went invisible right in the nick of time. Shortly after we all became transparent, I spotted Headmaster Black walking in our direction. Fortunately, I didn't think he had seen us. Or if he had, he didn't give any indication on his face that he had. He was carrying a large bag at his side, and instantly I just knew what it was. Another student who he had murdered. As he came to the small clearing where we had just buried Javier's body, he laid the bag down and pulled out a shovel of his own. He began to dig at the same patch of dirt that we had just covered. Oh shit. Headmaster Black was about to find Javier's body. I held my breath as I watched the headmaster dig up all of the dirt that we had just laid down. I heard the sound of his shovel hitting what I knew was Javier's body. It made me cringe. How peculiar, Headmaster Black whispered to himself. He dug up a little more dirt and then he stared down into the grave. Well, what do we have here? A vampire-werewolf hybrid. I always knew you would end up like this. You were never one to make very bright decisions, now were you? The headmaster chuckled. He sounded completely amused by the fact that Javier was dead. It made me feel sick to my stomach. Recovering Javier's body, Headmaster Black moved a few feet away and then began to dig another hole. It didn't take him long to dig up the dirt. In fact, he dug it all up quicker than my mates had dug up the hole we'd buried Javier in. It made me realize then just how strong the headmaster was. Once he was done, he pulled the dead body out of the bag he had carried there. Since it was so dark I couldn't see who it was. The only thing I could tell was that it was a female with dark hair, and she was completely lifeless. A knot twisted in my stomach. My wolfy intuition had swung into high gear. Again, I had this weird feeling that I knew the dead girl. The worst-case scenario ran through my mind. Maddie had long dark hair. But like Theo had pointed out in the past, Headmaster Black wouldn't have wanted to feed from one of the marked, and that was exactly what Maddie was. What were the odds of the headmaster actually killing my best friend? Unless he was doing it for a reason, like to send a message to me. Good night, sleep tight, don't let the bedbugs bite, Headmaster Black chuckled as he tossed the girl's body into the grave he'd just dug. I watched as he covered the body with dirt. It didn't take him very long to cover her. Within a few minutes the body was buried and then he smiled. He glanced around the area, that annoying smile still plastered on his lips. Might have only been imagining it, but I couldn't help but think that somehow he knew we were still there. After a few long moments he walked away from us. We listened until his footsteps could no longer be heard. Then finally we all allowed our bodies to be visible again. I guess he's been feeding on young people again, Aidan said. The horror I felt about the situation was mirrored in his honey brown eyes. So it seems. Theo looked sort of nauseated. My only question is who? Should we find out? I whispered. The absolute last thing I wanted to do was dig up the dead body the headmaster had just dumped here. A part of me also didn't want to know who it was. Ignorance was bliss. But I had also seen the dark hair and gotten that feeling. I just wanted to make sure that I was wrong, that there was no way this body could have belonged to Maddie. I knew I could have just called or texted her, but it had to have been close to 4 a.m. now, and I didn't want to wake her up. And what was I supposed to say anyway? Hey, just calling to make sure you're not dead? Are you suggesting that we dig up the body he just buried? Aidan asked me. I nodded. Are you sure you want to do this? Theo asked, glancing over at me with a look of concern. It might not be pretty. I'm sure, I replied. I wasn't looking forward to whatever we were about to see, but I just had this feeling that we had to look. The feeling was gnawing away at my gut. We should probably go invisible again, just in case he comes back here. Wouldn't want him to see that we're tampering with his dead bodies, Aidan said. Good idea, Kane replied. All right, let's do this. We all went invisible again. I watched as Theo, Aidan, and Kane dug up the dirt. I could see the dirt moving even though I couldn't see them or the shovels. With every shovel full of dirt that they dug up, the knot in my stomach twisted a little further. Finally, they had dug up enough dirt for us to get a good look at the body. I saw one of their flashlights turn on, and they shone it into the grave. As I moved in closer to get a good look at her, I gasped. It wasn't Maddie who the headmaster had killed. It was Jessica Davis. Chapter 26. I just kept picturing Jessica Davis's dead body for weeks after we had found her in the deadwoods. Her black hair fell around her shoulders, and her olive skin had been drained of all its color. I still couldn't believe that he had killed her. Of course it made sense. Theo's theory had been put into action. Headmaster Black had wanted to drink from the most powerful werewolves the school had to offer. That much was clear. He had chosen Milo Santorini's daughter for a reason. She was a direct descendant to an ancient, of course he had wanted to drink from her. It just made me think that Theo was right, that the headmaster would do anything to get his hands on me if he could. Anytime I passed the headmaster in the halls at school, he gave me this creepy smile. I wasn't sure if his smile had always been this creepy and I was only noticing it now, or if this smile was new. A part of me wondered if he kept smiling at me that way because he suspected that me and the rest of the Darken Pack had been in the deadwoods with him that night. After all, who else would have wanted Javier dead more than me and my mates? I had a legitimate reason to kill my bloodmate. As far as I knew, Javier hadn't had any other enemies. So, if Headmaster Black thought that we were the ones who had been out there with him, then that probably meant he knew he had killed Jessica too. More than anything, I wished we didn't know. I almost wished that we hadn't dug up her body, that we had just left well enough alone. The whole thing left me feeling haunted, and I just couldn't seem to get it out of my mind. One night over dinner at the Darken house, I said, "We have to do something about Headmaster Black." "What do you mean?" Reese asked, glancing over at me. "He killed Jessica Davis, remember?" "Of course we remember, Raven. How could we have forgotten?" Theo asked. "But what do you want us to do about it?" "I don't know. All I do know is that we can't let him get away with it," I explained. "We have to do something about it." "Have you discussed it with Milos yet?" Aidan asked. "Oh yeah. Let me just talk to my enemy about the fact that the headmaster killed his daughter." I rolled my eyes. "Raven, I was actually being serious." "He's got a point," Kane said. "Milos is one of the triangle. I wouldn't want to mess with one of us. And if Milos knows that the headmaster, then he can do something about it instead of us," Theo added. I sighed. "Fine. Let me summon him." Closing my eyes, I thought, Milos Headmaster Black killed Jessica. His eyes quickly appeared in my mind, and I realized that he must have been listening to our entire conversation as it was. "I'm aware of that, Raven." "Well, are you going to do something about it? Or are you going to just let him get away with murdering your daughter?" "I am not going to let him get away with it. I already have plans that I'm unable to discuss with you." "What plans would those be?" I found myself asking. Let's just say that, by the beginning of the next school year, Headmaster Black will be replaced. There will be a new headmaster, one who is far more deserving of the position. I will make sure of this. Well, that was slightly relieving. Even though I felt that justice needed to be served more than that, the last thing I wanted was for Headmaster Black to continue to be in control of Werewolf Academy. He was far too corrupt to be in that position. Who will the new headmaster be? I found myself asking Milos. Oh, come on now. Tell me you can't figure this out on your own already. Will one of my mates be promoted? I asked him. It would have made sense that one of the professors would take over as headmaster of the school. Milos chuckled. You really are naive sometimes, aren't you? Guess again. And that was when it hit me. You're going to be the new headmaster? Bingo. I could hear the grin behind his voice. Just think. You'll get to see me in the hallways and in your life on a daily basis. I swallowed hard. If what Milos was saying was true, if he really found a way to get headmaster Black kicked out and he himself became headmaster, then a change was definitely in order for me. Either I was going to have to drop out or transfer to another academy for werewolves. But there was no way in hell I was going to walk the halls at a school where my arch-nemesis was headmaster. Finals week should have been hard, and it was, but not because of my studies. Surprisingly, I had to study very little. I was able to absorb everything lately, but it was my personal life that was challenging. Everything that was going on consumed me in ways that it shouldn't have. There was the issue of Headmaster Black, of Jessica Davis being dead. There was the fact that we were all waiting for this war to begin. Or at least, I was anyway. Kane still wasn't entirely convinced. I also kept waiting for Milos to make his next move. I was surprised that he hadn't tried anything over the past year, but if I knew Milos as well as I thought I did, the reasoning was simple. He was plotting and planning for something big to happen. And then there was the issue of having to choose a lifelong mate. I began to view each of my mates as one of three elements: water, air, and fire. With some of my mates, I knew that life would have been easy. With Reese and Colton, I would have been happy and safe always. Life would always be without drama, without argument. They both reminded me of water, easy and go with the flow. With Theo and Aidan, life would be a mix of easy and challenging. With both of them, things came easy, but at the same time there was always some sort of conflict that kept me on my toes. Their personalities were like the wind. Sometimes things were calm, but at other times the wrong thing could blow things in a direction I wasn't expecting. Out of all my mates, being mated to Kane was probably the hardest. He was by far the most complicated of the five. And then there was also the fact that he was one of the three most powerful werewolves, one of the three most powerful alphas in the entire world. For some reason it was extremely overwhelming to be mated to him, knowing that. And yet, I absolutely loved every second of the challenges it presented. Kane was like fire to me. When we were together, our souls were able to ignite a spark. But if we weren't careful enough, I knew it could burn both of us in.